Dive into the heart of a relentless conflict in Beneath the Shadow of War, a Warhammer 40K tale. This story traces the harrowing journey of Caius, a young recruit whose resolve is tested in the unforgiving battlegrounds of the 41st millennium. From innocence to valor, witness a tale of survival and sacrifice in a universe where war never ceases. If you're captivated by this glimpse into the grim darkness of the future, remember to like, subscribe, and join us for more tales of bravery and despair in the Warhammer 40K universe. Chapter 1. Draft and Departure. In the serene fields of Ferros, where the war seemed like distant thunder, Caius labored under the tranquil sky, unaware that his life was about to change forever. The village of Ferros was a tapestry of green fields and rolling hills, a picture of peace in a galaxy torn by conflict. The day the Imperial draft notice arrived, it seemed like just another piece of parchment, yet its weight was felt throughout the Larn household. Caius's father, with lines of past battles etched on his face, handed him the notice with a complex look that mingled pride with a deep, unspoken sorrow. That evening, the Larn family gathered for a meal that was both a celebration and a farewell. Caius's mother prepared the dishes with extra care, each one a tribute to her son's upcoming journey. The table was filled with laughter and reminiscences, but beneath it all was a current of apprehension about the unknown future. Later, in the solitude of his room, Caius packed his few belongings. His gaze lingered on the small trinkets of his childhood, each a memory of simpler times. Lying in his bed, he stared at the ceiling, his mind racing with thoughts of the vast universe beyond his small world. The morning of his departure dawned with a quiet solemnity. The villagers, who had known Caius since he was a boy, gathered to bid him farewell. His mother's embrace was a fortress of warmth and unspoken fears, her eyes glistening with tears. His father's handshake was a silent testament to the strength and courage he hoped to see in his son. As the shuttle ascended, carrying Caius away from his pastoral world, he sat among other recruits, each embarking on their own new journey. The quiet hum of the shuttle's engines was a stark reminder of the path he had chosen. Caius looked out the window, the familiar landscape of Ferros giving way to the starry expanse of space, and felt a stirring mix of apprehension and excitement. He was leaving behind the only life he had known, stepping into a role far greater than he had ever imagined. Chapter 2. First Blood. The world of Thalos IV unfurled below them, a tapestry of destruction and conflict that was worlds apart from the tranquil fields of Ferros. As the transport descended, a nervous hush fell over the recruits, each absorbed in their own apprehensions. Caius peered through the porthole, his first glimpse of the battlefield evoking a mix of fear and awe. The landing was swift, thrusting them into the immediate and unrelenting reality of war. The base was a frenzy of activity, a far cry from the ordered discipline Caius had imagined. They were quickly ushered into a briefing room where the gravity of the situation was laid bare. An Ork assault was imminent, and they were to hold the line at all costs. As they hurried to the trenches, Caius's heart pounded against his chest. The ground shook with distant explosions, and the air was thick with tension. When the sirens wailed, signaling the Ork advance, a primal fear gripped him. He crouched in the trench, laser-gun in hand, waiting for the onslaught. The Orks appeared like a wave of destruction, their roars filling the air with a savage cacophony. Caius's training kicked in amidst the chaos. He fired round after round, the recoil of the laser-gun jarring his shoulder. The battle was a blur of movement and noise, the Orks' ferocity clashing against the Guardsman's desperate defense. In the midst of the fray, time seemed to slow for Caius. An Ork, its face a grotesque mask of fury, charged at him. Instinctively he fired, the creature collapsing mere feet from him. It was his first kill. The moment was fleeting, but its impact was profound, a line crossed from which there was no return. As the battle waned, with the Orks finally driven back, Caius stood in the trench, surrounded by the aftermath of their defense. The cost was evident in the weary and haunted faces of his comrades, and the bodies that littered the ground. The euphoria of survival was tinged with a sobering understanding of the war's true nature. That night, as Caius lay in his bunk, the day's events replayed in his mind. The sounds of battle still echoed in his ears, a haunting reminder of his first taste of war. He realized that this day had irrevocably changed him. The innocence of his past life was a casualty of this battle, leaving behind a soldier tempered by the harsh reality of war. Chapter 3. The Siege of Fort Halos. In the aftermath of his first battle, Caius and his unit were reassigned to Fort Halos, a critical point in the defense against the relentless Ork invasion. The fort, a bulwark of the Imperium's might, stood on a war-torn plain, its walls scarred by countless battles. Caius quickly realized that life at Fort Halos was a far cry from the skirmishes he had envisioned. It was a grueling routine of patrols, fortifications, and constant vigilance. The threat of Ork assault hung over them like a dark cloud, a storm always ready to burst. In the trenches and bunkers of the fort, Caius found a sense of brotherhood among his fellow soldiers. They shared stories of their homes and loved ones, a reminder of what they were fighting for. In these moments of camaraderie, Caius felt a bond forming, a connection born of shared duty and the stark reality of their situation. One chilly dawn, as a thin mist hung over the no-man's land, the silence was shattered by the guttural war cries of the Orks. The siege had begun. Caius felt a rush of adrenaline as he manned his post, his training taking over. The Orks surged forward in a wave of fury, their brutish forms emerging from the mist. The battle was intense and unforgiving. Caius found himself in the thick of it, firing at the oncoming horde, each shot a desperate bid to hold the line. Around him his comrades fought with equal determination, a symphony of lasfire and shouted commands filling the air. In the heat of the battle, when their sergeant was struck down, Caius's instincts kicked in. He found himself shouting orders, directing his squad with a confidence he didn't know he had. Under his impromptu command, they repelled the Orks, a small victory in the endless war. As the Orks retreated, leaving behind the chaos of battle, Caius looked around at the faces of his squad. They were marked by exhaustion, but also by a fierce resolve. In that moment, Caius realized he was no longer just a soldier following orders. He had become a leader, someone his comrades looked up to. That night, as Caius lay in his bunk, the day's events replayed in his mind. The siege had tested him, hardened him. He thought of his family, of Ferros, and how distant they seemed now. Caius understood that the war was changing him, forging him into a weapon for the Imperium, and he accepted this transformation, knowing that it was necessary to survive, to protect what he held dear. Chapter 4. Under the Siege's Shadow. In the ashen twilight of Thalos IV, Caius and his unit, soldiers of the Astra Militarum, navigated a landscape scarred by relentless conflict. The ruins around them whispered of the planet's once glorious past, now reduced to a canvas of desolation under the siege of war. The air was heavy with the scent of spent munitions and the distant yet ever-present rumble of artillery. Their mission, dictated by the dire needs of war, was to disrupt an Ork supply line, a task fraught with peril but necessary to stem the tide of the green-skinned menace. Caius, his youthful innocence long eroded by the harsh realities of conflict, led with a quiet determination, each command a reflection of the burdens he bore. As they edged closer to the Ork encampment, nestled in the remnants of a shattered hive city, anxiety gripped them. The Orks, crude in their warcraft but brutally effective, were an unpredictable foe, their raucous battle cries and mechanical monstrosities a stark contrast to the disciplined order of the Imperial Guard. The assault unfolded with a tense urgency. Explosives, planted under the shadow of darkness, erupted in a cacophony of destruction, momentarily illuminating the night sky with their destructive ballet. The Orks, caught off guard, responded with a frenzy of violence, their guttural roars echoing through the ruins. In the thick of the fray, Caius moved with a survivalist's instinct. Each shot from his laser gun was calculated, a balance between conserving ammunition and providing effective cover for his unit. The combat was a grueling test of endurance, a dance with death on the razor's edge of survival. As the first light of dawn broke, casting a pale light over the smouldering remains of the Ork encampment, the cost of their mission became apparent. They had achieved their objective, yet the victory was overshadowed by the loss of comrades, each fallen soldier a stark reminder of the relentless toll of war. Weary and somber, Caius and his unit made their way back to the Imperial lines. The soldier from Ferros had been transformed by the crucible of war, now a seasoned Guardsman. his resolve tempered by the trials he had faced. Yet within him, a question lingered. In this unending war for survival, what part of themselves were they leaving behind on these battlefields? Chapter 5. Shadows of Victory. The aftermath of their daring raid on the Ork supply line left Caius and his unit in a somber mood as they returned to the relative safety of the Imperial camp. The camp, a sprawling maze of tents, barricades, and the constant bustle of soldiers, felt strangely alien after their time behind enemy lines. The echoes of their victory were dulled by the reality of war that surrounded them, a constant reminder of the ongoing struggle for Thalos IV. In the days that followed, Caius found himself wrestling with the duality of their success. The destruction of the Ork supply depot had earned them accolades from their superiors and whispers of admiration from their peers. Yet, in the quiet moments away from the adulation, the faces of the friends he had lost haunted him. Each fallen comrade was a story cut short, a life extinguished in the unforgiving furnace of war. As they prepared for their next assignment, the dynamics within Caius's unit had shifted. The shared experience of the mission had forged them closer, a band of brothers and sisters bound by more than just duty. Caius felt this change most acutely. The young soldier from Ferros was now a leader, his decisions carrying the weight of lives. Their new mission was to hold a strategic point at the outskirts of a recently recaptured settlement. It was a critical task, one that would ensure the flow of supplies and reinforcements to the front lines. As they fortified their position, Caius could sense the resolve in each of his soldiers, a determination hardened by their recent ordeal. The Orks came at them like a tide of fury, relentless and seemingly unending. Caius and his unit fought with a grim tenacity, each burst of lasfire a defiance against the onslaught. The battle raged through the night, the settlement a backdrop to their desperate stand. Caius, in the midst of the chaos, found himself not just fighting for survival, but for something greater. The future of Thalos IV, and the hope that one day the war would end. As dawn broke, painting the sky with streaks of crimson and gold, the Orks retreated, leaving behind the scars of battle. Caius and his unit, exhausted but unyielding, held their ground. The victory was theirs, but it was not without cost. The settlement they defended lay in ruins, a grim testament to the price of their defiance. In the aftermath, as Caius walked through the ravaged settlement, the reality of their war was laid bare. It was not just a fight against the Orks, but a struggle to protect what little humanity remained in this dark, war-torn galaxy. He realized that each victory was just a brief respite in an unending cycle of conflict, each triumph a fleeting moment in the vast expanse of the 41st millennium. Chapter 6. Echoes in the Ashes. The relative calm that followed their defense of the settlement was short-lived. Within days, Caius and his unit were called upon once more, their presence required at a new flashpoint on the front lines. As they marched out of the camp, leaving behind the smouldering ruins of the settlement, Caius could feel the weight of expectation on their shoulders. They were soldiers. Their new assignment was to fortify and defend a critical manufacturing complex, vital for the production of munitions and war machinery. The complex, a sprawling maze of factories and smelting plants, was a crucial artery in the war effort against the Ork invasion. Caius understood that its defense was paramount. Losing it to the enemy could shift the balance of the war on Thalos IV. As they set about fortifying their position, Caius felt a sense of déjà vu. The complex, with its towering smokestacks and flickering forges, was reminiscent of the settlement they had just fought to protect. The air was thick with the smell of molten metal and burning fuel, a stark contrast to the natural pastoral beauty of his home on Ferros. The Ork assault, when it came, was like a tidal wave of destruction. The enemy, emboldened by their relentless nature, surged towards the complex with a single-minded purpose. Caius and his unit met them head-on, their lasguns and heavy weaponry creating a wall of fire. The battle was a grueling, each explosion and clash of metal a song of ferocity, music of conflict. Amidst the chaos, Caius's leadership shone through. He directed his unit with a calm authority, navigating the labyrinthine complex to outflank and ambush the enemy. His orders were precise, each maneuver a strategic play in the deadly chess game of war. The fighting continued for hours, the complex becoming a battleground of fire and shadow. Caius, at the heart of the whirlwind, fought not just for the Imperium but for the men and women under his command. He had seen too many fall, and he was determined not to lose any more. As the last of the Orks were driven back and the sounds of battle faded into the distance, Caius surveyed the damage. The complex was scarred but still standing, its forges and factories a beacon of hope in the war-torn landscape. They had won, but the victory was somber. The air was filled with the echoes of those who had fallen, their sacrifices a grim reminder of the war's unending toll. In the aftermath, as Caius walked through the complex, his gaze fell on the ash-covered faces of his soldiers. They were exhausted, their eyes reflecting the horrors they had witnessed. Yet there was a fire in those eyes, an unspoken vow to continue the fight, to stand against the darkness that threatened to engulf their world. Chapter 7. The Last Stand. As twilight descended upon the war-torn expanses of Thalos IV, Caius stood amidst the ruins that had once been a fortress of hope and defiance. The air, tinged with the acrid scent of burnt metal and spent lasgun charges, hung heavy over the desolate landscape. Around him, the few remaining members of his unit prepared for what they all understood to be their final stand. The relentless war had stripped away everything but the barest essence of survival. Each day had melded into the next in an unending cycle of conflict and carnage. The once robust ranks of Caius's unit had dwindled, casualty after casualty, until only a handful of weary souls remained. The Orks, ever ravenous for battle, surged forward as night fell. Their brutish cries and clanking machinery shattered the fleeting silence. Caius, his once youthful features now marred by the scars of war, raised his lasgun with a resigned steadiness. The fight was no longer about victory, it was about fighting until there was nothing left to give. As the battle raged, a tempest of last fire and primal fury, Caius moved among his soldiers, a guiding presence in the chaos. Each shot he fired was a defiance against the inevitability of their end, each command a desperate effort to prolong their final moments. In the midst of the carnage, as he felled one enemy after another, a solitary truth settled within Caius. There was no glory in this end, no songs to be sung or tales to be told. This was the reality of the Astra Militarum, of the countless soldiers who fought and fell in obscurity, known only to the uncaring stars above. As the first light of dawn began to touch the horizon, casting a pale glow over the battlefield, Caius felt the searing pain of a mortal wound. He fell, not with a hero's grace, but with the weariness of a soul long burdened by war. Around him, the few remaining defenders fought on, but there was no one left to witness his fall, no one to mark the passing of another soldier in the endless war of the 41st millennium. Caius's last moments were not filled with fear or regret, but with a profound resignation. As his vision dimmed, the sounds of battle fading into silence, he thought of Ferros, of the life he had once known. In his final breath, there was a fleeting sense of peace, a return to a time before the war had defined his existence.